The impacts are primarily of most importance in contexts where there is an existent vulnerability. So social vulnerability creates a space where climate change impacts become much more challenging. And this is already something that we see. As we look into the near future, and as we look into a world that is not doing enough to mitigate climate change, the future impacts of climate change can be catastrophic and can be irreversible. In issues of fundamental importance for poor people, and this is, I think, the key. So on the one hand, you have the lack of adaptive capacity that poor communities all over the world have to shocks. On the other hand, what we have is climate impacting things, issues, and sectors that are of fundamental importance for poor people. For example, water, agriculture, changes in temperature affecting crops, droughts, extreme events. So poor people who live more directly to nature are strongly affected. The impacts in infrastructure, for example, we know that what makes a disaster is not necessarily the natural shock. We saw this, let's say, in Haiti with the earthquake, but the same can be said to a storm. Like here in New York, the impacts of Sandy were mostly and more strongly felt by those areas of the city that are more vulnerable, that are poorer. So it's this unbalance what is of fundamental importance. There is also the justice aspect. The communities, the people, the areas of the world that have contributed less to the accumulation of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, which are a negative side effect of a model of development that has not really paid sufficient attention to the social aspects, are the ones that are being mostly impacted. So this generates a double injustice from a social perspective. Climate change needs to be responded to, and the world is certainly aware. We are not mobilizing, but it's certainly aware that those responses need to be equitable. And those responses need to produce social value. So here, the opportunity for social development is very clear. And it's to say that without really paying attention to the social aspects, it will be very difficult to really mobilize towards those climate resilient pathways, right? We need to marry somehow the idea that development is no longer something that advanced economies help developing countries, but that we all need to rethink what model of development enables us to really be progressive. And this means that the rethinking of the conception of progress is at the core of what we do. And this rethinking is not a technical issue. It has to be about mobilizing the entrepreneurship and the capacity of multiple social sectors to really respond to climate change. So it is like the double side of a sword here, that the key risk and challenge affecting the most poor requires the most poor to be on board in order to solve what is ultimately a global problem.